And I want to go now to the former CIA director and former commander of U.S. Central Command, the retired Army General David Petraeus. And General, thank you so much for your time. So, as we're watching that and we were talking about Ukraine wants 300 to 400 of these tanks, but they're getting about 100 of the combined, not all M1 Abrams, but also with the Leopards, each of which have their own attributes. 31 Abrams, I guess, 80 Leopards, and then the UK also sending their Challenger tanks. So when you look at what's been promised, what does it mean? How significantly does it change the battle?
Well, it's hugely significant, and it's significant symbolically that this next step is being taken. It's very significant substantively on the battlefield. The tank is the centerpiece of combined arms operations, which are what will be necessary to have successful offensives this summer, maybe late spring, by Ukraine to take back, to liberate more of the territory that Russia has occupied since 24 February. That tank is the piece around which everything else will be built. There are infantry fighting vehicles. We're already providing those, training them in Germany. There will be artillery. We've provided a lot of that. There will be air defense, engineers, electronic warfare, EOD, drones out front. But all of this exists to get that tank to the decisive point on the battlefield and to keep it essentially invulnerable from the various threats that could be presented to it.
And so the tank really is the centerpiece. And you're saying the M1 Abrams, from your experience with it, is as impenetrable as a vehicle as exists.
It's extraordinary. Obviously, during the fight to Baghdad, I was a two-star general. If it employed correctly and you keep the enemy's infantry away with their anti-tank guided missiles, you clear the obstacles and mines and so forth, that 120 millimeter cannon is enormously powerful and effective, and it will take out anything else that is out there. Yeah. But the key is you've got to have those as the centerpiece. Of course, you got to train on those, and so there will be an effort, I'm sure very quickly, if not already ongoing, perhaps training them on our tanks before these tanks are procured by General Dynamics, and then the others that are going to come, the Leopard 2s from Germany, Poland, and the other European countries that have them, as well as the Challengers. And again, this is only a third of what it is that Ukraine would like to have in a perfect case. This is quite a powerful.
But it's enough,
this is a lot. This is multiple battalions, probably 2 brigades at least, of armored and mechanized infantry forces with all of the other elements around it. And that can be a very powerful punch, and it could enable them to break through in some key areas and ideally deny Russia that opportunity to support the elements in Crimea directly from Russia by the ground.
So you think this does put Crimea on the table?
I think it puts the support for Crimea. I don't think it puts Crimea. That's a whole different military problem. It could enable the Ukrainian forces to get the multiple launch rocket system with the precision missiles in range to take out some of the very important air and naval bases and so forth in Crimea. But to sever the ability to support Crimea would be of enormous value and enormous importance.
Absolutely. So Russia today called the tanks extremely dangerous, saying it takes the conflict to a new level of confrontation. That was the defense ministry. Putin said this today. Let me just play it.
I have no doubt that one way or another, sovereignty will be returned to Europe. Judging by the look of things, it's going to take a little while longer.
All right, so in it for the long haul, but what do you hear here when you hear that they're getting ready for an offensive? You hear those words. Do you think a real escalation of a nuclear situation is on or off the table right now?
I think it's unlikely, highly unlikely, because I think we've communicated effectively to him that this would put him in a worse situation after its use than before. And that has to continue to be the message. Look, we have to do everything we can as quickly as we can to enable Ukraine to show Russia and to show Putin that this is not sustainable, that this war is not sustainable on the battlefield, where they've already lost 8 times the soldiers in 11 months that they lost in nearly 10 years in Afghanistan. And also, by the way, through our financial, economic, and personal sanctions and export controls, which we need to tighten further to show Putin it's unsustainable at home.
So when it comes to unsustainable, a lot of people watching will say, all right, hundreds of thousands of Russians have been mobilized, many of them, some large number of them killed already. Hundreds of thousands of young men, when the first mobilization started, fled Russia.
Yes,
probably multiples of the people who
showed up at the
more fled than showed up. Okay, then we hear about the mass use of prisoners as fighters, right? So it all kind of gives the impression that things are falling apart and Russia is running out of men.
But
it isn't really true.
He's
Right.
actually doubling down. He's just announced, and his Minister of Defense has confirmed that they want to increase the size of their armed forces by 150 to 200,000 soldiers.
got those
They're
numbers.
trying to get the military industry stood back up. And again, we have to convince him that this is not going to achieve the progress, that this is going to be a losing proposition, because until then, there
Yes.
will not be meaningful negotiations.
And just on this, though, his willingness that he's putting out there to continue with this, the fact that there are actually the numbers of people, if you're going to throw them out there to die, to do it, and a lot more people in Russia
Which
than
is
in
what
Ukraine.
they're doing, by the way. They're not well trained. They're not well equipped. They're just pushing them into these battles like Soledar and Bakhmut, taking massive casualties for very incremental gains. And what they eventually take control of is they've largely destroyed in the process of actually seizing.
We're
it.
looking at Soledar, but does Ukraine need actual boots on the ground assistance to win or not?
We're not going to do that. That's just not in the cards whatsoever. There is not going to be that kind of support. And these lines have been drawn very, very clearly by President Biden, the NATO Secretary General, other leaders of NATO countries. We should be doing everything we can to enable Ukraine. By the way, keep in mind that Ukraine, a country less than 1/3 the population of Russia,
Right.
has out-generated forces. In other words, it's done better at recruiting, training, equipping, and employing additional combat capabilities, supported by $27 billion just in arms and assistance from the United States alone, as well as others.
All right. General Petraeus, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Wonderful to
Good to be with
see
you.
you here on set.